She gets set up.
Okay.
Where's Tammy?
We'll let everybody get a.
You might want to turn your mic on.
That's a good idea. Thank you. Appreciate it.
No, we don't.
Okay. Current project 25. Oh, well, this is good. Current school year, so next year.
Mr. Boyle, are you in charge now?
Bear with me. Bear with me. Theoretically. Yeah.
They gave him the hammer.
I know. All right.
Better.
I will call the meeting to order of the EVIT Governing Board, and I've asked Mr. Hunt to lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. So we are starting today, presentations and recognitions. We have item 3A, the crisis plan. Dr. Wilson.
Mr. President, members of the governing board, I want to take a minute and compliment and thank John Zaccato, who has been instrumental in retooling and reformatting and updating our crisis plan. Crisis plans are incredibly important at organizations on a number of different levels. First and foremost, to keep our students and staff safe. But EVIT has some uniquenesses that other school districts don't. One of those uniquenesses is that we oftentimes have quite a few outside agencies and individuals on our campus for very good reasons. And so balancing some of those individual programmatic opportunities around making sure our campus is still safe is a challenge that many other districts don't have. On top of that, because we serve so many school districts and each school district has its own crisis manual and crisis plan, us trying to marry ours in ways that allow us to complement what is already being taught and learned at their home high school is a bit of a challenge as well. And Mr. Zaccato has done an amazing job trying to pull all those pieces together. So John, if you please come up and just kind of give us an update on the crisis plan.
He's the one that did this? God. Can't believe all this.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson, Mr. President, and members of the board. Yeah, this is a challenge, and the thing I love about EVIT is that we're unique, and the challenge is that we're very unique. And so where traditionally for example, in a lockdown situation, it's really easy. You lock the door, close your windows, and you're good to go. Well, when your classroom is, 4,000 square foot auto shop, how does that work? And so we work really closely with the Valor Threat Protection. He is a local police officer here in Mesa. Spent plenty of time on campus. His kids will be attending here soon, so he's got a little bit more buy-in than the average guy. Unfortunately, he's on call tonight. But we did a very deep dive into every building and tried to pair with the state standards on how to lock down a classroom. And we're working with IT to facilitate some of those changes. So the crisis manual that you may have been sent is really a very
Complex.
It's an outline for how we want to do things, and there's some details for each building. I mean, on this campus alone, we cover 19 buildings, and we have people in every building at all times of the day, and so it creates quite the challenge for us. Some of the things that we have planned for the future once this is approved and we can start moving forward is a lot of training. We're working with Valerie. We'll be making videos with our marketing department so that we can have those videos and use those as we onboard new people all the time, but we can also use that as part of our summer training so that we can all be on the same page. And really the outline is the Valor Threat Protection is basically they talk about recognizing the problem, protecting the students, communicating, and then going from there. And so that's described in all the different, the many different crises that we can come up with. I mean, even in this place, we have to consider what would happen if an airplane came down on our school and finding evacuation places. So we can't just evacuate to Fry's over here because it wouldn't work. And so we've reached out to local churches and stake presidents and found places that we could evacuate to should we need to leave this location. And so there's a lot of details in here, and I'm happy to go over more details if you want, but real briefly, We had to define classrooms and shops and the differences in how to lock those down and protect our students from outside threats, from inside threats, and the line of communication and chain of command there. So that's been, with as many staff members as we have, that's a long list of people. So we try to keep it as simple as possible. Any questions, gentlemen?
I have a statement.
Sure.
I was a teacher, and this is unbelievable how much you have to do and teachers have to do right now. So many different protocols, about 3,000, I think, that you had to go through and everything. But there's a lot of work, and I appreciate you doing this and putting it together.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Like I said, it's a living, breathing document. As construction finishes and starts in different places, a lot of this is going to change, and as staff moves in and out, we'll be able to keep those trainings up with the videos and the contact list and the chain of command in order. So it's not by person, it's by a title, and I think that's going to help us quite a bit in the future.
I have a question, but I also wanted to thank you for the incredible amount of work that had to have gone into this document. But my question is, has the state of Arizona okayed the use of a firearm by an instructor in a classroom?
Not to my knowledge.
Do you know, Dr. Wilson? Has
Sorry,
the
I guess I
state,
shouldn't answer.
I don't believe so. I don't believe that the state of Arizona allows an instructor to have a concealed weapons license and use a firearm. I don't believe so, but we can check for you.
several states have started doing that, at least you read it in the paper.
Right, and I know there was some discussion about it in the state of Arizona. I just don't believe, I could be wrong, but I just don't believe that had occurred yet, but we can research and bring it back to the next meeting,
It would certainly have to come from the state, we couldn't just do it
100%.
on your own,
And I
right?
believe even if it came from the state, you as a local control board still have a say in whether,
Correct, I'm not sure I agree with it, but I know several states have started it. Tennessee, I think, comes to mind. Okay, thank you.
To go along with that, one of the nice things is we do have a criminal justice department. We have a lot of retired police officers on our campus and people who have experience with that. Not that I'm saying we go that route, but that is something to take into consideration as
We at
well.
least have them available.
Well, not on our campus, no.
Oh, not on the campus.
so this was just a discussion item, and what I'd ask you to do is to spend a bit more time kind of reviewing the plan, and then we'll bring it back for approval in the near future, but we wanted to give you a brief presentation on it, give you the plan, let you kind of digest it, then bring it back again at a later date for approval.
What's the projected timeline for being able to train the faculty and staff on implementation?
JC?
Right now, we feel like once we have approval on a few, on these items, realistically, to do a simple modified lockdown, I think we could have that, we could get 2 of those done before the end of this school year.
Great.
As far as a full lockdown and things like that, we need to coordinate with Mesa PD, and they want to be involved and help us out and use our facilities as well. And so it would be a good relationship for both of us.
Mr. Boyle, also to answer your question, part of the videos that they're working on is going to be part of our new teacher and
Cool.
startup at the beginning of next year. But it will not be that everybody watches every video. It's going
Sure.
to be an assignment that we do through Canvas. We have certain assignments that they have to do every year, like bloodborne pathogens. This will be one of those, depending on what building they're in, that they're going to have to watch the procedures for their building, because it is different depending on where you are on campus as to what your role is and what you're supposed to do. So that will happen at the beginning of the year, and those will be assigned through a Canvas module where they'll have to watch that. And then the instructional specialists in our curriculum design team will do a Canvas that they'll have to answer a couple questions specific to what they watched to know that they actually watched it. So
Great.
that will be part of the training that will be implemented every new year. And then they'll all have the document. We used to print it off and put it in every classroom. We will still do that for the subs, but we're asking our in-house people to not use that as their document, to always go to the living, breathing internet document.
Sure.
That the paper document's really just there a backup in case you don't have access to the internet.
Great, thank you. Any other questions, comments? All right, thanks.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, Dr. Wilson, 3B, TSA scores.
Mr. President, members of the governing board, one of the things that I would like to compliment Dr. Doolin on, and as she's worked with our sending districts and helping us help them and ourselves become who we expect ourselves to be. We've talked before about how you ultimately have a responsibility for the quality and content of programming in all CTE courses in the East Valley. And so one of the ways in which we're helping to shepherd some of those discussions is by creating the quality indicator rubric that Dr. Doolin has talked about a number of times, and she's created that in consultation and collaboration with our CTE directors. One of the indicators within that rubric, within that evaluation tool, is the TSA scores, TSA's Technical Skills Assessment. So every single one of our programs has a state assessment to it, aligned with showing proficiency on on the skills within that program itself. I will caution us that every single indicator in isolation does not paint a picture about program quality at the central or the satellite campuses. But what we want to do is begin looking at the combination of different indicators. And so last month or 2 months ago, I can't remember what it was, Dr. Doolin presented persistence, the number of students that actually went from the first to the second sequence and completed the courses, and we talked about the importance of persistence. She's here tonight to talk about the TSA scores, both at the central campus and at our satellite campuses. Dr. Doolin?
On. There it is. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk to you yet again. Just to reiterate, we went over the persistence in January, and we went through every single program, and we talked about the highs. I showed you an example from each one where you saw a high and a low. Tonight, we're going to be looking at those same programs, so all of our satellite districts that we have IGAs with, and each of the programs that were approved, and these are the scores from last year. So this isn't the TSAs. They haven't taken their TSA school year. So this is not the 24-25, this is the 23-24 results, because these are our lag results. So we want to go through this, and then again, this will be combined with the other two indicators that we've identified on the quality rubric, and then we will bring that back at the very end of the year, probably, I believe it's in May. I think we have everything by May. We'll bring that back to you to give you a complete picture where you'll be able to see how they performed across the way. And one of the things that the satellite programs, the CTE directors have asked is that we have definitive markers. And one of the definitive markers is if they score in 2 or more areas below the quality level, that it could lead to an improvement plan. So that is the markers we're looking at. So like Dr. Wilson said, one individual low would not necessarily trigger an improvement plan, but 2 out of 4, which is about 50%, most likely would trigger an improvement plan in some area. Okay, so I'm going to introduce, I won't make her talk, but Nicole Q is back here, Nicole Quo Thomason. She does so much hard work behind the scenes, and I can't thank her enough for all the work. She's put together all of our persistence data and our TSA data. She pulls it from the ADE website. So again, this information is taken directly from ADE, and we will project it up here for you, and we'll start going through. We'll start with the EVIT Central Campus, so you get an idea of how the EVIT campus is doing on the markers.
Smaller. There we go.
There we go. Okay, so there's a lot of markers when we talk about TSA. This is not the granular issue. This is just the overarching issue. So with this information that we're looking here, we're just looking at strictly the state TSA average and then where EVIT scored on the state average plus 10%. So you will see that EVIT has a requirement. We actually want to be this is for EVIT Central, we want to be 10% above the state average. That is not the same requirement we keep for our satellites. Our satellites is just that they meet the state average or above. But for EVIT Central, we expect us to be 10% above. That is the goal for our teachers on the central campus. So you will notice that there's some that have no TSA, and so they're scored as a 1, which means not meeting. That really wouldn't be not meeting. Those would be as zeros because those specific programs don't actually offer a TSA at the state level. At the EVIT Central campus, we have developed or are in the process of developing our own TSAs that we will give moving forward in all of these programs. So moving forward, you will see them have scores, but we will not be a state TSA. It will be a TSA we developed in-house because we want to have some equal markers to track how they're doing. So we're developing exams in-house that would serve as their TSA, if that makes any sense at all. So we'll start where you can see air transportation. They're in the 3%. Aesthetics has no TSA, so it's a 1, but really it's a 0 because there's no TSA. One that we would be concerned about is where you see automotive technologies. You'll see that the statewide TSA average is 40, the TSA statewide, is it statewide, and then the 10% would be 56. We did not meet that. Is that correct? We scored a 46?
We are under the level, so here, let me show you specifically so that you can see.
She's the master of the spreadsheets. Automotive is just one that is, some of you have talked to me before about automotive. It's been one that statewide it has struggled to meet TSA, and we've really been looking at that exam, and several of our instructors have participated in helping ADE look at that exam and rewrite that exam. So right now we are not meeting, and that is one that we are going to continue to watch and hopefully see improvement as we move forward. This is one, however, that you will see when we get to certifications that is well exceeding in
So
certification.
I just have a quick question. It looked like in the other spreadsheet, we were meeting it on auto.
It's probably because we're not meeting the plus 10%.
76%. I just want to make sure I'm interpreting correctly. So is column H,
Right, so, let's see. And forgive me, because this was a little bit of a rush job.
oh, and I know like the most stressful thing in the world is having a lot of people watch you as you're working on a spreadsheet. So I'll try not to do that. But I want to make sure that we're giving credit if it's a data validation concern, that we're giving ourselves credit, because if we are passing at 76, then we are well over both 46 and 56. So I just want to make sure we are,
Right, and so let me just make sure, because you're absolutely right. The,
Good catch.
yeah,
you all know that this is what I live for.
I know you do.
That was
We're
like
good
4
for-
seconds.
Yeah,
And then-
and especially, if we can give ourselves credit for exceeding, I think that's great.
I'm impressed you can read it. I can't read any of it.
Only with these, only with these.
Okay.
I'm the same way.
so for this one, why don't we actually just look at the, for EVIT, just for EVIT, let's look at the actual numbers so that you can see where we are. So, do you mind?
Yeah, go right ahead.
So for the number of students who took the examination, 237, and 76% of those students did pass the exam. There are no TSAs for baking or barbering. For construction, we had 50 students take the exam and 80% of them passed. Cosmetology, we had 421 students take the exam and 91.69% pass.
That's amazing.
Culinary, so I think, can you see a little bit better here? Or is it still helpful for me to kind of read through it?
Yes, I can.
If it-
So, but Nicole, go back to the, but this one doesn't have the state average on it, correct?
No,
So
and I
was
can
the
pull it in
one,
really quickly if,
but when we go back to that other document you had, it did have, so is that just a misprint that it should have been 76 instead of 56%?
so.
Or were
no.
you not giving our score?
Here, let me look, because I'm showing from a number of different places. So for auto, the percent of students who passed across the state was 46%.
Okay,
And so we did clearly exceed that.
It's 76,
and
so that
that's-
one's just
that's an error.
miscoded as a 3.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's an error.
so that one would just be a 3, so that's one where there's a 1. I do know that one of the areas that we are behind in, if I'm correct, is diesel.
You know what? My apologies. There is, I can see.
Like I said, the most stressful thing is when you're
okay.
working on an Excel
I think I
under
know what's
pressure. So thank you very much.
Especially when
So
the
here,
comments.
let's switch to another
The other
one,
one?
and then,
Okay.
and then I'll come back in and, so my apologies for that.
This is just general information, it's just for us, is that
Yes.
correct? Okay.
Yes.
So if it's not 100% correct, it's okay.
Yes, because this isn't the final, this is just the first round, and then we'll bring the final of all of these back to you, because we always want to give our satellite district, if they see something that's off in our errors in our equations as well, they get the opportunity. They did the same thing with placement, we sent it to all of them, so we'll send them all TSA as well, so that they can check ADE website and do their due diligence as well.
I think I get the
So
idea.
at this point, we're gonna,
There
we
you
can
go.
go reverse, reverse alphabetical, or we can start at the top and
Okay.
work our way down. Apache Junction does not have any,
Yeah, Apache Junction wouldn't have any TSAs because they were part of our CTED last
Sure.
year, so they would not have any TSAs. So this is going to be, are we at Tempe Union?
we're at Tempe.
So this is Tempe Union, and this is going to be their Pro Corona del Sol, and you can see where they are, so we can look at the side. So what we're really focusing in on is where the ones are. So do you want to explain a little bit with early childhood, why it's 93 and then 103%?
So the 93% is the pass rate at the state level. So this is one of those exams where most people do tend to pass it. Hence the reason why we had the state average plus 10%. And that is
Is what's in the-
absolutely-
in the
it is
rubric?
in the-
Okay.
I think so. Because some of the examinations are easier to pass than are others. So if people are passing, then they are meeting the expectations, they get a 2. If they are somehow below the statewide average, they get a 1. And if they manage to do 10% or above of the state average, then they get a 3. So for early childhood, because so many people pass that already, all this is a formula that's adding 10%. So clearly you can only, we top off at 100%. So it would be really challenging for anybody to get a 3 for early childhood, because the test is, I won't say easy, but it's.
More people pass it.
More people
More
pass
people
it.
pass it. So what we're really looking at is if they are, so 2s and 3s are all where we want them to be. It's going to be the 1s, which means for Tempe Union, they didn't make the 93. Right?
So can I ask a clarifying question? So on this chart, you have the TSA statewide average, what it would be to exceed or meet. And so so that, we're not saying that Corona del Sol Culinary Arts scored a 90. The 3 is indicating that they scored at least 10% above what the statewide average was to be exceeding the standard. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. And you know what? Why don't I do this? If I may be so bold.
You can be as bold as you would like to be.
This is not the clearest, clearly. And so I can very quickly just pull in the actual scores, but it's just going to take me about 10 minutes. May we
Yes.
switch the agenda?
Come back.
Yeah.
Or we can even bring this back if you would like, that's fine. So, and then we can
yeah.
get hard copies for them so that they can
Table it.
see all these variances.
Okay.
And we'll
Clearly
just-
see.
Yes, because I'm hearing that that would be easier for them if we gave them hard copies.
Understood.
So we'll just put it on the agenda
next-
for the next,
next time.
but I'm going to need a motion, correct, to table it, or no?
No, because it's just a discussion item. I
discussion.
think we're okay.
So we'll just bring this back. I'll have Nicole work on this some more, and we'll bring it back at the next meeting.
Great, thank you. And I really appreciate the data. I'm looking forward to it. From what we saw there, looked like there might be a lot of threes in there, which is a very good thing. So thank you again, and we look forward to seeing it in March.
It won't be, I'm out of the country for a little bit.
We'll figure, you'll be here,
Yeah.
we'll put it at one of the meetings you're at.
We'll figure it out.
Thank you.
Cool, thank you. All right, let's move down to 4A, regular meeting minutes for February 10th. Is there a motion?
I would like a motion to accept them, but with one correction. I am not the president that adjourned the meeting. We need to put in the current president, not last year's president name there.
All right, is there a second for the particular motion?
I'll second.
All right, let's vote by acclamation. Call it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? Hearing none, passes.
All right, thank you. Is there a call to the public?
No, sir.
All right, thank you so much. Let's move on to consent agenda items. Is there a motion combined for 6A through G?
I'll move that we approve the consent agenda items A through G.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, is there any questions, comments? Okay, let's call for the vote by acclamation.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And no abstains. Okay, passes.
Great. And moving on to item 7, personnel. Is there a motion for item 7A?
It's your turn.
I'll move item 7A.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any discussion on the item?
Jump in.
Hearing none.
All right, let's move to vote by acclamation, please.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes.
Okay, and moving right along, we've quite a bit of information and discussion, so we'll kick it off with item 8A, current and projected school year 25-26 enrollment. Dr. Wilson.
Mr. President, members of the governing board, would it be okay if I just kind of wrapped A, B, C, D, E, F all into just one discussion? So we don't-
Please do.
Yes,
Please do.
They are all part and parcel of the same. Two things before I get started. One, I'd like to thank Ms. Perez. We were given some direction by you the last time we were together to begin gathering information that you thought would be valuable and helpful to you as we start talking about contracts for the 25-26 school year. And as you can see, Ms. Perez has put together quite a bit of information for us in a relatively short period of time, so thank you. Secondly, I'm going to try really, really hard to be concise, because sometimes I just get on a wind of words, and I don't want that salad to happen today. So bear with me, but I want to make sure you get enough information that it makes sense. Item number A is our current projected 2025-26 enrollment. As a reminder, our budget is largely funded and built on enrollment. There's other dollars that come to us, but largely, as goes our student count, so goes our budget. So the enrollment does matter. It matters on a number of different levels, but for today's purpose, it really matters in terms of beginning to understand our budget and what we can afford and what we need to be mindful of, not only now, but moving forward. Our current enrollment for this year, as of 12/4/2024, was 6,028 students. So December 4th of 2024, on our books was 6,028 students. Enrollment as of 22/2025, so last week, we're forecasting or projecting an enrollment of 6,713. So at first blush, that looks like we're growing, and we might very well be growing. But if you take a look a little bit down, you'll see that on 7/7/24, so last school year, right before the school year started, on the books was 7,705. So on our books forecasted for next year, 6,713, that at the end, right before we started the school year, it was 7,705 that we had expected to come. Is that making sense so far? So what you see in reality, we aren't necessarily growing. Now, we might, because we still have enrollment happening, but to compare our projected enrollment to our December number wouldn't be fair. It's more likely to be looking at what we experienced right before the start of the school year. Where it became more of a challenge for us this year is when you looked at our enrollment on 9/3/24, it was 6,831 students enrolled. So that means between 7/7/24 and 9/3/24, we lost 876 students. Now, that could be that we were students that just didn't show, or they came for a couple days and decided that this wasn't for them and they went back to their home high school. One of the challenges that we have, that we do have year over year, is that we enroll students in November, December, January for the next school year, which makes sense because they got to make their master schedule for their home high school. But by the time then we roll into August or July of the next year, 6 months have gone by, and that student that was excited and ready to go isn't as much, and they don't show. And so by statute, though, we can't remove those kids from our books until they've missed 10 consecutive days. So always that first 2 weeks of the school year, we really don't know what our numbers are until we purge those first 10 days. That, there is some hope moving forward, some signs of optimism in that discussion, though. I think our recruiting department, I think, did a much, much better job this year when they were out recruiting our students to really explain to them the expectations of EVIT. I think in years past, sometimes the information we gave wasn't as factually honest about the expectation. So students got here and they're like, wait a minute, this isn't what I wanted, and they left. And I think we did a much better job this year going into next year of really making sure students know what to expect at EVIT. I think we're also making a concerted effort. Dr. Doolin and her deans are working with the marketing department and Ms. Todd to create some mini videos of programs that we can pump out to our prospective students from their teacher, kind of from now till the start of school year, to keep those kids connected, to keep a touch point current, not just a touch point in November. I know our counselors are going back to our home high schools one more time and talking with the students that have already enrolled. Again, having another one of those touch points so that we are more proactive in making sure that students that have signed up for us actually show up on the start of the school year. You'll see, though, in 12/4/24, so going back to the original number that I started with, we had 6,028 students. That means from 9/3/24 until 12/4/24, we lost an additional 803 students. So those are students that were with us at the start of the school year, showed up, stayed with us, and then for some reason during the school year left us. Some of that, I think, is due to dynamics at their home high school. I mean, sometimes students will run into issues at their home high school that precludes them or prevents them from coming or staying with us. I think sometimes it's just the nature of a high school student. As a high school principal, we would have students that would move anytime during the school. I mean, those kinds of things happen. But I also think, and I had this conversation with our faculty and our staff last Friday, I also think that we internally have to recognize that EVIT is a school of choice. And when my son was here, he gave up quite a bit to come here. He would go hours 1, 2, 3 at his home high school, didn't have time for lunch, had to pack his lunch, get in his car, drive down here, change his uniform, get on the campus. And it was the environment in his classes that kept him coming. It was the teacher that kept him coming. It was the connection he had to the industry, to his teacher, and to his students that kept him coming. And so some of the variables that we can't control that led to that 803 reduction, but there are variables we can control. And I think those variables are re-engaging and refocusing and re-understanding that if a student makes a commitment to come here, we are obligated as professionals to make it an environment that is meaningful to them and matters to them. And I think if we do that, then that 803 number that we lost last year, we would hope that that percentage we wouldn't lose again moving into next year. Is that making sense? So there's a lot of ifs, whats, and hopes in there. But the long and short of it is, I'm not anticipating us having the significant growth that we've seen year over year. I am hopeful that we are flatlined, maybe a titch above flatlined in growth. What I am also hopeful, though, is that the students that come here actually stay here, start the year and finish the year with us. And so we may start with a lower number, not reflecting growth, but actually wind up with a better ADM, better funding, because the students actually stay the whole year. Is that making sense? So my point on that is, we always talk about, are we growing or we're not growing? Are we growing or we're not growing? I don't think we're growing. If we are, I think it's going to be somewhat minuscule, but I do think we have systems in place that will offset some of that, hopefully, as we get into the next school year. Long term, I think there are some things that we've got to wrestle with as an organization. I think CC Todd sent this to me the other day. She looked at the demographics of our partnering high school districts, right? So this doesn't include the charter schools, this doesn't include the home schools, this is just the district the district public schools that we partner with. And the demographics over the whole of the CTED paint a narrative by, I think it's 2030, did you say, CC? 2030? About 8,000 fewer students will be eligible to attend EVIT. Not because they don't want to come, but because the area is aging out. We have fewer students that are going to be, so my point on that is that even if we're seeing a titch of growth this year, or a little bit of, we will always have our foundation as high school students. That's what we're built on. But we have to begin wrestling with the realization that over the next few years, those numbers, the percentage that are even eligible to come, are going to be fewer than what they have been. And so that's why when we have talked about adult education, again, I reiterate, high school will always be our foundation, always be who we are. But we have put into place our certificated programs, our associate degrees, so that we would be able to go after the market share of those students that are aging out. Remember, if there's 8,000 less because they're no longer in high school, that means there's those 8,000 are out in the workforce, potentially wanting to continue their education post-high school or their training post-high school. And so part of the systems that we've been building and we will continue to build long-term to help offset some of this is also our adult education. But when we look at then item B, when we look at how we build our budget, historically we have always built our budget on a 3% decline. Always built it on a 3% decline. And the reason why we did it is because we always wanted to make sure that if we have a situation that we're thinking thousands of students are going to show up and they don't, that we're still going to be able to generate enough revenue to offset the costs that we're going to have to incur. And so over the years, we've always built on the 3% decline, and then we would add during the year if need be. So as an example, if we said that we were going to have one section of diesel mechanics, and we had one instructor, and that's what we built the budget on, but we wound up having 125 more diesel students sign up, we would hire another instructor and then build that into the budget when Ms. Perez revises the budget. But what we wouldn't do is overstaff with the hope that they would come. And then if we did have growth, then what that allowed us to do is it allowed us to not only take care of that year's budget, but begin looking at how we can utilize those dollars moving forward. So when we talk about the buildings that we built out at Power, that you all built at Power, the expansion, when you look at the renovation that's happening here, EVIT doesn't have a capital bond or an override. And I would encourage you never to go out for a capital bond and override. I know, I mean, I came from a traditional district, I understand why that happens. But I think when you go down that road, you open up a model that is really, really hard to close. And so what we've been able to do over the years is to offset the costs by building a budget on a deficit, but having a titch of growth and being fiscally conservative. So I've asked Ms. Perez to build this next year's budget, not on a 3% decline, but on a 5% decline. Again, the additional 2% is a hedge towards the concern that if we grow, it's not going to be at the rate that we've grown in years past. And there's, like I told you in the item before, there's a lot of ifs and shoulds and hopes and wants. Well, without knowing whether that's going to materialize or not, we don't want to overextend our budget and not know necessarily exactly who's going to show up on those first 10 days. So the question becomes, how do you build a declining in budget, right? A declining enrollment budget. And one of the things in talking to Ms. Perez that I have to be held accountable for is it's really easy in August when somebody says, hey, can we just add a fill in the blank, to say yes to that? And I say yes to stuff like that all the time. And 3 or 4 times, all of a sudden now, we have encumbered an additional, $250,000. So I've got to hold myself accountable to saying no. But what I'm also going to ask my team is in their own areas to say no as well, because no needs to happen throughout the system. And so what that means is if we build budgets and supplies, for example, of a program, and we built it based on the projected enrollment, and that enrollment doesn't materialize, we will claw back the dollars that were allocated based on the enrollment that didn't materialize. versus leaving the dollars there and just letting the department or the program, spend the resources that was allocated. It was allocated around a student count that didn't show up. Is that making sense? And so that's how you begin building a budget around a deficit, that once we set the budget and we recognize what we're going to be obligated to in terms of staffing, in terms of supplies, in terms of resources, that we hold ourselves to that. There's some pieces too that I think are interesting at EVIT that doesn't happen in a traditional district. The funding for a 2.5 hour class is different than the funding for a 4 hour class, right? So one is a 0.75, one is a 1.0. So when we look at our enrollment, the numbers may be the same or even down or up, doesn't matter, but where those kids are and what programs they're in will ultimately drive some of that as well. And so for us, the idea of making sure that we're being cognizant and a 5% budget declining enrollment, that we're actually being purposeful in trying to look at building as much as we can those 4 hour classes, because those generate obviously more revenue than the 2.5 hour classes. Also, too, one of the things that we know is a possibility, although I don't know definitively yet because we haven't had the rate renewals, is that we are looking at probably a significant increase in our healthcare. Now, there may be some pathways, some avenues to offset some of that we're pursuing, but that is part of that budgeting process too. When we talk about, what's the totality of the budget, we also have to take into consideration the health costs as well, or the increase in healthcare as well. I think it's important that you all understand, and that we as employees once again say thank you for the work that you've done the past 5 to 6 years. When I became the superintendent, one of the things that was a real challenge for us is that our salaries weren't competitive. And we compete not necessarily against our neighboring school district for instructors. We compete with the private sector. And so when you need an HVAC instructor, you don't necessarily go to the College of Education at the University of Arizona, right? You go down the street to the HVAC company, see if there's anybody that's interested. Well, the salary that the HVAC technicians are making in the private sector are often significantly more than what we pay in the public sector. But you as a governing board recognize that and look for ways in order to offset some of those. And so just so we all are on the same page, over the past 6 years, instructional staff have received just a pay increase of 47% over the past 6 years. But you all did more than just a pay increase, because you also rearranged certain positions. You realize that the market share, if I'm making $2 an hour and the market share says, or the market says I should be making $10 an hour, you giving me a 5% increase is wonderful, but I'm still going to be below what the market's telling us. And so you guys tasked Ms. Perez to go do a market analysis. So you also adjusted the base in a number of positions as well. So, and that adjustment increased compensation by between 50 to 68%. So on average, over the past 6 years, you as a governing board have increased faculty teaching positions on average about 56%. Wow. You'll see non-instructional, same sort of conversation, 27% just salary increase, but you'll see here's where we were in some ways the most off. And so you rearranged different positions to give an average of non-instructional increase of about 69% over the past 6 years. So again, I think that's important, because I think you guys have shown your willingness to look for bold ways to make sure that you're able to provide compensation to your employees that is competitive, so we can go attract and retain the best for our students. The question always becomes, though, how does that compare to our competition, right? And our competition, like I said, is really hard to define, because in some ways our competition is what the private sector offers. But we're in education, we're public sector. So what Ms. Perez did was take a look at how we compete against not only the district schools that we serve, but also Westmac and Pima JTED, which are the kind of closest comparables for CTE districts in the state. So at EVIT, though, our base starts 3 years of experience at $51,456. Then we put additional dollars in for years of service, for certification, for hard-to-fill positions. You guys have been very gracious in giving us the ability that if there's an individual or specifically an area within the organization that is really hard to fill, that we have the ability to pay beyond the salary schedule to get those individuals, which has been, I've got to tell you, it has come in handy on so many different situations. Our 301 performance plan is, my opinion, one of the, if not the best that you're going to find in the Valley. And that's not an exaggeration. When I was a superintendent of a traditional school district, traditional K-12 comprehensive school district, on average, we would pay our teachers about $2,500, maybe $3,000 in 301. So that's on top of the salary, right? It's your performance on top of the salary. Here at EVIT, you guys have really been proactive in using that as an opportunity to give additional resources. And so last year, you all paid out in 301 performance anywhere between $7,896 to $19,412, with an average 301 compensation in addition to the salary being $13,257. So, what does that really mean, though? Those are numbers, but what does that really look like in terms of, so we looked at new hires this year for the 24-25 school year, and the range of our hire was 52,456 for one individual, all the way up to 78,821 for another individual, which means on average, the new hire came into EVIT at $64,989, not including the 301. So again, that's just the base. And so whatever those individuals got in 301 was on top of what they were being paid. On average, teacher salary for the district, so that was new teachers just coming in. So on average, our salaries across the system are $69,103 for the contracted obligation, but with the 301 compensation, on average, our teachers are paid $82,357 a year. Now, as a reminder, that's a 10-month contract. You'll see that in some of these other districts, their dollar amount might be larger, but it's on an 11-month contract. In addition to that, there's also the benefits that you all provide. As an employee, you cover my single health care. If I want my family, then I pay for that. There's health incentives in order to help. So there's other things in the compensation outside of just the base contract and the 301. But like I said, this is significantly better than what it was 6 years ago, and you all have done an amazing job giving us the tools to go after and attract and retain the best staff that we can. So how do we compare to others? When you look at Westmac's base, now again, comparing to others is really difficult because we can get off their salary schedules and we can get but the nuance that I described with us, with the hard to fill, we don't get that from them, right? And the funny thing is that when we look at salary compensation, we'll get Westmac calling us, asking us for ours, and then we'll call them, and so we're probably all kind of in the same boat. But Westmac's base is $65,650, and that's for an 11-month contract. So if you prorate it to a 10-month, it's $59,681 for a 10-month contract, which is a titch above our base. But as a reminder, I would wager that our 301 is significantly richer than theirs. And so when you look at the total compensation, it would be fair to add all of the 301 and the total compensation. And the same thing that with Pima J-TED, their base is 46,350 on a 10-month contract. So ours is markedly above theirs. Scottsdale's base, so now we're just talking about the Unified School District. Scottsdale's base is $49,109. Again, I don't know if it's changed, but when I was in a comprehensive district, I mean, the 301 didn't add $13,000 on top of that, or $19,000 on top of that. Mesa Public Schools is $55,380. Tempe is $55,091. Chandler Unified is $54,567. So again, the whole purpose in sharing all this with you is to give you guys credit and to thank you once again for the work you've done the past 6 years, allowing us to become more competitive, but also to make sure that we're being honest with ourselves and saying in that time frame, you guys have done a lot to get us to be competitive, and we are now at or above, I would argue, our competition in terms of the public sector. You also asked us to talk about the cost of living index in Metropolitan Phoenix, as well as the cost of living increase that was approved for Social Security. In December, I believe it was, the cost of living index in Metropolitan Phoenix was 1.6, And then what was approved for the Social Security cost of living was a 2.5% increase. So, again, I'm not a financial guy by any stretch of the imagination, but obviously, the work that you all have done to allow us to become competitive, I would hope you wouldn't want to take steps back, right? So obviously, the idea of looking for ways to keep our folks at least at the cost of living, so they're not taking a step back, would, in my mind, make sense, but that's just me. So what does that mean in terms of the impact on our budget, right? I mean, all of this is great, Chad, but what does this really mean to us in dollars? And you can see, if you start with the 1.6, which was the cost of living index in metropolitan Phoenix, and you add and you just approved that as an increase, as an example, the cost associated to that organizationally, including benefits, not health, but just the FICA, the retirement, for a 1.6 for increase for your employees would be 72,000. Is that right, Ms. President? Oh, I gotcha. Included would be $434,334 for a 1.6% increase. If you then take another 0.5 and make it a 2.1, you see the total cost to the organization is roughly $570,000. If you do a 2.6, you see it's $705,000. If you do a 3.1, it's $841,000-ish dollars. So again, that begins to give you all a sense of, if you incrementalize the rate and increase at 0.5, what impact does that have in the budget, right? Circling then all the way back to the budget process. If the governing board says, oh my gosh, Dr. Wilson, what we want you to do is to figure out how to, what's the cost of a 25.5% increase? And we come back with you with those numbers, right? We will then use those numbers as part of our budget, and we're still gonna budget at a 5% reduction, decline in enrollment, which means we're gonna have to shave elsewhere within the organization to accomplish that, right? So, I mean, obviously, your decision in terms of compensation doesn't necessarily change the approach on building the budget around a declining enrollment, but it does change the complexity of that budget depending upon the percentage of increase, if any, you're willing or wanting to provide your employees. That was a lot of words, but I think that was shorter words than my normal.
Very helpful words, so very much appreciated. Questions
Yes,
from
I
anybody?
have a question.
Please.
How much is a titch? Is that a titch above or a titch below?
A titch above, about 1 point.
Is that spelled T-I-T-C?
T-I-T-C.
I never heard that
Yeah, a little
before.
titch, a little bit, just a little bit, just a little bit. Little titch. Yes, little. So I mean, we would be happy to answer questions for you. I mean, obviously, this is not an action item tonight. Our goal is to give you enough information that we can come back in our next meeting in March, and you would have the ability to have confidence in recommending a salary increase for staff. The goal is still to get contracts out by March 15th. Now, if you're not comfortable, if that's pushing it, then we can certainly push it off another meeting, but this is at least the beginnings of information for you. Happy to answer any questions you have, happy to bring additional information forward to you at a subsequent meeting, so you all feel comfortable before you make decisions that would impact us organizationally.
So this is basically just for the teachers, not administration.
No, so that's a great question. So So one of the things that is interesting in this organization that I don't find in other organizations is that because in our teaching positions, our instructional positions, we compete against the private sector, you all have had to be far more proactive in increasing the compensation of our instructors, which you should. I mean, listen, I'm all for it. But in doing so, if you remember, in doing so, you actually created a salary that made it less likely for individuals to want to enter into administration, because the compensation that you were affording a 10-month instructor was in some ways more than what you would be paying a 12-month administrator. And so we came back to you last year and said, we're going to have a hard time here, because if you do that, you know, we've really taken the approach of growing our own in here. And I think that in some cases, we'll still bring outside individuals in. But we've come to believe that, EVIT is unique enough that you need to know about us to really be able to flourish here. And so we want to grow our own. So we came to you and said, the problem is that we have some of our deans that will be making more if they stayed in the classroom. And we said, that isn't good practice. And so you rearranged the deans last year to make that differential. So if you give an increase to our instructors that's not the same increase across the board, what we're doing is actually reversing the work that you did last year. We're closing that gap again. So no, my recommendation, and again, people are gonna say, yeah, because you're just an administrator. Honest to goodness, every single year I've come to you, I've said, teachers should deserve a higher percent, and you have always done that, but at the expense of what I just said. So this year, my recommendation is that whatever percentage you give, that it be across the board for all staff, so that we don't start slipping back to that spot, because we're gonna come back to you 2 years later and say, the same problem we had last year.
And that means your compensation in there too, correct?
My compensation is just the kind words that from the dais. That's my compensation.
A pinch.
A titch.
So, a couple things that I'm thinking about, and thank you for putting this together. I think we should not wait for the agenda item to be anything past next meeting, which is March 10th, because statutorily, the first day contracts can go out is the 15th. So if we wait at all after, we will have missed that boat. So I would encourage folks to either speak now in terms of information you would like, or really forever hold your peace, because we will be way behind if we don't get that action item done at the next meeting. And then I am glad that you addressed the items in terms of student retention, and I'm glad that those are top-line priorities for the org too, because those deltas are pretty material in dollars and cents terms,
Huge.
but I think pretty material as well, just when we think about our mission and what we want to accomplish. And so I'm glad that we're really actively acting to support, getting the right students here who want to be here and then keeping them as well.
100%. Now, I will say that one of the things that I think we did better at this year than we have years past is we have a greater percentage of students in first-year programs that are coming back to the second year. So historically, we have not done that. So to your point, Mr. Boyle, I think that the idea of getting more first year coming to second, but also recognizing that we've got to shore up why those first-year students probably didn't stay at the rate that we would want them to stay.
Cool. And then this is, I think, for both Dr. Wilson and Ms. Perez. I remember I think it was last year, you provided a presentation for us either in conjunction with the recommended salary schedule approval or soon after before budget approvals that walked through the ins and outs of school finance. I know we have a couple of new colleagues, and then I've been in the field for 15 years and still need reminders. And so if we could do that maybe in concert with one of the next couple of meetings as it's budget season, it'll be super helpful.
It's a great
to get
idea.
the information that we can make the best decision too. Thank you.
And honestly, I mean, it is a lot. And so if there are other items that you would like us to pull together, we'd be happy to do that. If you'd like to come in and just talk more, we'd be happy to do that. I mean, there's honestly, we're more than willing to provide any information that will help you all better understand where we're at and what we need to do in order to stay fiscally responsible, but also stay fiscally competitive.
Anything else from anybody?
Nope.
All right, thank you, appreciate it. Let's move to the action items. We have 9A, a policy revision, second read. Is there a motion?
Come on. Make a motion.
Otherwise, we'll just sit here.
I'll move the
It's okay.
9A
Is there a
policy
second?
revision.
Thank you, Mr. Lane. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay.
Since the newbies won't do anything.
I was going to second it. You told me.
Your mic's off. Now it's on, okay.
Are there,
I'll give my second
okay,
up. I'll give my
deferring
second
our
up.
second. Does anyone have any discussion, or Mr. Coble, anything to add to the action item before we go for a vote?
I have nothing to add from last week. It's just agreeing that we're going to follow the ADA regulations and the law and the terms of the grant that we're seeking.
Okay. Acclamation.
Any additional discussion? Let's call the vote by acclamation, please.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It passes.
All right. Action item 9B, engineering shop price schedule. Is there a motion?
Come on, Newsies.
All right.
We got a
Motion to
motion.
approve. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. All right, Dr. Wilson, engineering shop menu, action item 9B.
Mr. President, members of the governing board, I'm actually going to,
the ice, and you're all set.
Mr. President, can you speak to
You
that now?
put your John Hancock there. I did a second and framed it. Oops. I'm sorry.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the board. This is just a listing of the price menu that our engineering program has for their enterprise account on any of the services that any of our programs do provide to either they sell items, goods, or services. The board needs to approve those price menu items, and this is what that is for engineering.
Oh, engineer, okay.
Any questions or discussion? All right, we'll call the vote by acclamation, please.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes.
All right, thank you. Let's move on to action item 9C, the Hope Tech Strategic Plan. Do we have a motion?
I move to make a motion.
To do what?
Do what? Yeah,
To approve?
9C.
All right, thank you, sir. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Dr. Wilson?
Mr. President, members of the governing board, I'm going to turn over to Dr. Doolittle to explanation on this, please.
Excellent.
You guys are having way too much fun up there today.
We are. It's a good time.
As you recall, last time we met, we did the Hope Tech Strategic Plan. So we went through everything, reviewed the Hope Tech Strategic Plan, where we are, where we hope to be, what the challenges we have that we have faced, and gave you an update all around Hope Tech. This is just the item for you guys to approve that information. I do want to put one little caveat, because I think it's a cute thing to shout out. Our resident advisors just had a brand-new baby 2 days ago, 3 days ago, so congratulations to
So
them.
we have a third person working
Yeah,
there.
the third person.
Yes, we are.
The one that will keep them up.
That go in the early childhood development.
Exactly. Listen, you talk about how we're going to grow numbers.
There we
We're
go.
growing our numbers, Mr. Lane.
Yeah.
So just congratulations to them. We're happy for them. But again, the Hope Tech Strategic Plan.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Doolin. Any questions or comments from any members? Okay, let's call the vote by acclamation, please.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passed again.
All right. And now let's move on to action item 9D, GMP 7.8 contract for the Building 1, Floor 2, early procurement and demolition. Do we have a motion?
I'll move the contract for, what is it, GMP 9,
7.8.
7.8, I'm sorry.
Cool. Thank you,
For
Mr. Lane.
the building 1.
Second. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. Thank you. Dr. Wilson?
Mr. President, members of the governing board, one of the things that and I've said this before, that I'm very appreciative of Chase Construction and SPS Contractors is that they're really proactive in getting early procurement and or early demolition dollars in a GMP ahead to us, right? What that allows us to do is actually to maximize resources and use some of the same coverage that they have existing on the campus in the phase that they're currently in. And it also allows us to make sure that we're staying timely in some of the purchases we know we're going to need that have lead time. So what this is asking for is that early procurement and demolition for the Building 1's second floor. So as you remember, we're rapidly wrapping up the Building 1 first floor remodel, and that our attention will now turn to the second floor remodel. There's still some design that has to occur on that second floor, but what this is is the early procurement of material we know we're going to need, as well as the demolition.
What's the timeline going to be for this one?
This is just for the north side?
Yes. Yeah. The GNP, the early procurement, is largely for the demolition of the north side. We are not doing demolition upstairs on the south side at this time, but it is the early procurement for all of the HVAC resources, because we are replacing those, as you know, throughout the entire, there's some life cycle stuff that has to be changed everywhere. But we are only remodeling at this time the north side. That was largely decided because we have a lot of room here. And we don't know exactly what we're doing with the other side, so it didn't make a whole lot of sense to tear it down when we didn't have a plan for it.
Question here. I noticed a lot of graffiti on the, not graffiti, but whatever it is, markings on the pavement out there. Is that part of the HVAC or?
No, that's part of the central plant, the underground.
Central
Yeah.
plant,
The water
And so-
pipes.
The water pipes, yeah. Yeah, so if you take a walk around the campus, you'll see that they're, slowly but surely digging up and replacing the underground piping. And so the plan is that'll take us, I think, until June, maybe, of next year.
Like, don't get
for them to
excited,
do
it's
that.
like next.
And then they'll, at that point in time, then we'll get the chillers in the central plant in, and they'll convert it over. But no, that's the underground piping for the central plant.
Looks like you're gonna lose your parking place out there.
I listened to,
Some of it's blue stake stuff too.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. To answer your question, so currently, and correct me if I'm, what's the timeline to get building 1 second
So
currently?
currently, right now, they're gonna do demolition in March of again, let me make sure I'm very correct, on the north side. They've already started on the south side, the bathrooms, because that's just happens to be where the bathrooms, so the bathrooms have already started in some of those areas on that second floor. But we'll only do the north side classrooms. Demolition will start during spring break. It will be finished up, and the goal is to have it done by July 1, but I'm being realistic and being prepared that I don't anticipate it being done until October. We're running into a couple of delays with the design portion of it, and that, if you remember, we found out from ADE late that they were doing away with the music audio programming, so we need to do some curriculum work, LOPES, in order to what we're doing with radio, interior design, because those are going away. Those happen to be the areas we're remodeling, so it made sense to slow it down so we do it right, and we're fiscally conservative to make sure it's designed for what the community needs at this time. So that's why I'm anticipating it won't be done by July 1, it will be delayed a little bit longer, and that's on EVIT's part, with having to relook at the curriculum to make sure we have the correct design, not necessarily on Chase's part.
Cool, thank you.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Since we've got a couple of new folks, can we just briefly go through what a GMP is? Because
Yeah.
this is our first, I think, big capital expenditure for the new year, so that'll
So
be
it's the
helpful.
guaranteed maximum price, and so what they do is they come and they say that this is the amount that they're guaranteed that they won't exceed to do the work that they're indicating that they're gonna do. Within that, there's oftentimes some contingencies that are built in, contingencies that we carry as well as contingencies they carry. One of the good things about Chase so far, knock on wood, in the construction project here, is they've managed to not use all of the contingencies throughout the project, which means at the end, there's going to be dollars that will revert back to the organization to repurpose in different ways. The GMP on the pre-construction, every single phase has had that, largely because, again, the efficiency and the effectiveness of being on the front end of it allows Chase to procure the material that we know has a long lead time, but also when they have some of their subcontractors that are currently here, to be able to keep them here and start the work versus releasing them and then bringing them back is actually a more cost-effective way. And I think their liability also, umbrella, loops over some of the early procurement if we started ahead of time, so we're not paying for a project phase to end and then starting a new one, having a new startup cost. We're actually just phasing them in. We will come back to you at some point in time when the design is done with the GMP for the actual floor 2, building 1, that would be the completion of it. I don't know when it's gonna be, but sometime in the near future, I'd like us to maybe schedule, you guys can come on your own whenever you want, it's America, but maybe before a board meeting and show you the work that you did in building 1, because it's amazing.
That'd be cool.
When you walk through there, it truly, truly is amazing. And so to see the work that's been done on building 1, the first floor, to the new members, we've remodeled the automotive, we remodeled the fire, we remodeled the trades, the industrial trades. We're doing some minor remodeling and reconfiguration of space in the cosmetology building. We're partnering with the Arizona Masonry to do some of the remodel work and exchange in-kind contributions so that we can get some of that work done. Left, when this phase is done, we'll have a discussion about what next still needs to be done, and that would be potentially the culinary building, as well as some other projects just around the campus that we might want to do, but that's a ways down the road. And then to the new members, obviously, several years ago, the board agreed to go out to the Power Campus and add 2 new buildings at the Power Campus. And so it was a facility that at one point in time had 3 buildings. Now it's a facility that has 5 buildings and additional parking, additional wrapped area. And again, all of those have been paid for through the efficiency and the conservative approach towards fiscal responsibility, not going out for additional resources from our community.
Great. Thank you. And I'm assuming we have accounted for this in our budget for the year, and we are all, with the theme of fiscal conservatism,
Yes.
we are all set?
Yes.
Cool, thank you. Any additional questions or comments before vote? All right, let's call the vote by acclamation, please.
All in favor?
Aye?
Any opposed? Hearing none, it passes.
All right. And we are now on action item 10, which is a call for an executive session. Do we have a motion to move into executive session?
Also move, we go to executive session.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, thank you, sir. Let's call the vote by acclamation, please.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, we go to executive session.
All right. We are on item 11A, staff report, superintendent summary. Dr. Wilson.
Mr. President, members of the governing board, I just want to take a minute and thank some folks that I think sometimes I, at least, just take for granted. First, I'd like to thank our tech department and individuals who, every single Monday on a meeting, I text them and say, hey, just a reminder, we have a board. I always get from Chris, we're on it, we got it. And sure enough, I look out my window and throughout the day, they're in here and they're testing and they're making, and it's just such a nice relief to know that when it's time for the meeting to be going, that it's going to work. And should there be a problem, that we have the resources here to fix it. So thank you very much for every single meeting, making sure we're ready to go. Facilities, I text Mr. Bernasek and I say the same thing. Hey, just a reminder, he's always so kind because he says thank you, but I'm sure what he's saying is, I know, but we, every single time, the boardroom, we had a luncheon here today for a different organization, and I was worried, and I came back a little bit in the afternoon, cleaned up, ready to go, dialed in. I'm in culinary. We are fortunate that we have a meal together once a month, and for the chefs to constantly look for different meals and different ways to make sure that the meals we have together are enjoyable is just a real pleasure and a treat. So I don't say thank you enough to those folks, and so I want to say thank you to the tech department, thank you to facilities, and thank you for culinary for doing the work they do to make tonight and nights like this successful. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson, and certainly thanks to all of those folks on behalf of us as well. Let's head to closing items, 12A, calendar. Anything anybody wants to add to the next one other than what we've already discussed this evening? I think the next board meeting is March 10th.
Yep.
Correct.
All right, we'll have the contracts up, or not contracts, the parameters for those will be up, so that'll be great too. Thank you. And if there's nothing else, item 12B, is there a motion to
I
adjourn?
motion that we do 12B and get out of here.
Second?
I'll second.
Thank you, sir. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right,
You went back to your job.
I did.